Hey all, welcome back to Tales from the Table Studios. I'm Lion, they, he, and this is Roll for Perspective, a show where I sit down with content creators, GMs, artists, game designers, and more within the TTRPG space to discuss settings, system tips, tricks, insights, and a whole bunch of cool stuff. Today, I am very excited because I get to sit down with Paul from Ampersand Productions. Thanks for being here.
Absolutely no problem. Thank you very, very much. Like you said, my name is Paul, aka Ampersand. I run Ampersand Productions, and I'm honored to be invited here. Very excited for our chat. It's like we discussed just before we started recording. It's our first time talking and physically seeing each other, so it's nice to put a name to a face.
Yeah, we've been in contact back and forth for what, almost a year now,
Yeah,
maybe a year. Yeah, and it's cool getting to sit down and do this as our first
yeah,
communication.
this is it. We're like, no, but we'll save it. We'll save it for a proper chat.
Yeah.
We didn't half-ass anything, so that's fine.
So what? So you know what? Before I get to anything else, I'm going to ask you the first question I ask everyone, which is, how did you get into TTRPGs, and what kept you coming back?
Excellent question. So I originally dipped my toe into TTRPGs, what must be now 9-ish years ago. When I actually got told I would be a great dungeon master before I ever heard what TTRPGs were. And I thought it was really inappropriate because it was my colleagues that had told me. Like, oh Paul, you'd be a great dungeon master, wouldn't you? And I'm like, I don't know what that is. Is that a sex thing? It's probably a sex thing. It is, but not what they were talking about. So yeah, so then they asked me to run a game for them, and I'm like, okay, great. Could you just tell me what D&D is? Feel like that might be important. They didn't, and I had to go research it. And I came up with my entirely own system, which was apparently looking back a mixture of point buy and um chaos all over the place. But I just put it out to my colleagues. Anybody who wants to play, come to my house. I expected 3 or 4 people to turn up. Read online, 3 or 4 people, great number of players. 9 people turned up,
Oh no.
and I was like, "Hi, we're going to be playing Dungeons and Dragons. I don't know the rules." And we had one D20 between all of us. We none of us had a set of dice. We only had a D20, so we just rolled with that. My dog ate it at one point, and I had to get it out of his mouth. Um, it was absolute chaos. We had the power rankings were off the charts for some people. Someone was basically playing Deadpool. Someone was playing the like Avatar, the last Airbender character, like with all 4 powers. One person was just playing a guy with a stick. Like the balance was not there. Um, yeah, it was so stressful. It was an absolute nightmare, and I was hooked. That was it. I was there. So then over the next few years, well, about year and a half, I found games in my local place. I lived in York at the time, and I was like, okay, I want to get into this. This sounds exciting. I'll play. And I played about 2 or 3 games, different games, different dungeon masters. I played a bard, a rogue, and a barbarian, and I hated it. I like after 4 games with each person, I'm like, this is boring. What is this? And I sat down and was like, well, hold on. I loved what I did, but I hated playing with people. What do I want? Like, what do I like? Turns out I like dungeon mastering and having the control. So I thought nothing of it. Thought, okay, I like dungeon mastering. Skip a few years, and like a lot of people in the community at the moment, during COVID, every one of my friends wanted to run a game. I eventually got hooked. I ran it well enough that people wanted my one shots to become a regular series. They loved the game that I was basing it on, so League of Legends by Riot Games. I did that entire universe. I knew it all off by heart. I was obsessed at the time. Um, yeah, for a free game, I'd spent about 3 grand on that game. I'm about to say it's a fantastic game. It's not. It's a good game with a terrible community. But yeah, so I was hooked, and then I got onto Twitter, and then 2 years later, I am what I am. I run Ampersand Productions. I'm creating my own game. All the things we're going to talk about today. But yeah, that's how I got into it. I've Someone told me I'd be a good dungeon master. 9 people turned up to see if I was. I might have been. I don't know. It was a one shot, and it went horrifically wrong. Yeah.
That's amazing. I love that. I've heard a lot of stories, both recording Roll for Perspective and just existing in
Of course. Yeah.
TTRPGs for so long, I've heard so many stories of how people got into it. I don't, and like some of them are adjacent, right? Like I've heard stories where people are like, "Well, we were interested," and I was like, "Well, I guess I'll be the DM." But I
Yeah.
don't think I've ever heard of a story where it's like, "Hey, you'd make a really good DM. You should run this game that you've never heard of before."
Yeah. I was
Great,
like,
tell me about it.
what?
No.
Yeah, it really was. Like, oh, we don't have time. Maybe another day. But could you run it for us next week? I'm like, no, I can't do that. But yeah, all right, I did. I was more impressed that 9 of my colleagues got the same day off. Yeah, we only had 13 people working at the store. So me and 9 others all got the same day off. It was a small store, so they got away with it. But I was really, really impressed.
Yeah, that is I think in my experience unheard of.
Yeah.
So you mentioned Ampersand Productions. And I think for those unfamiliar with what you do, can you tell us a bit about what Ampersand Productions is, what y'all do in the space? And if
Mhm.
you have any like specific core like goals or anything like that.
Yeah, so Ampersand Productions is basically me using my skills as like a video editor and as a performer, as a showman to basically do all the things that potential dungeon masters or potential players are either afraid to do or it stops them from doing the dungeon mastering. A lot of dungeon masters, especially on Twitch, on stream, as a showman, they just want to sit down at a table and dungeon master. But when you do it on Twitch, you have to worry about who's in chat. You have to worry about overlays. You have to worry about pop-ups, all these other things. And they're the things that I particularly enjoy doing. So Ampersand Productions is ideally about giving people the opportunity to shine on a streaming platform without having to worry about all the streaming platform side of it. It gives them a chance to have an audience because I've already generated it over the last 2 years that I've been doing it. Have all the equipment in terms of like the computer side of things. They have to bring their own dice. I can only do so much. But yeah, originally it just started because I wanted to stream and I wanted a production company because I wanted to produce work. And so, I looked up the word ampersand to see if anybody else has had it. It's incredibly associated with D&D. I love the history of the symbol being the 27th letter of the alphabet in years gone by. So, yeah, I just took over that and we've produced a fair bit now. We're on to our 5th streaming game. A couple have ended, 2 are still going on and 1 is new by the end of this month. We're going to start showing that off and advertising it. And we've had a wide variety of DMs. We've got pretty much different players at every single table because that's what I want. I've had to turn players down because I'm like, no, you're in 2 of my other streams. Let's give somebody else a chance. Let me try and find somebody. I think there's like 2 players that are on 2 different shows. Yeah. There's 1 on 3, but 1 of them ended, so it don't count. But yeah, so Ampersand Productions was just a chance for me to basically use my film degree because I did it for 3 years and I might as well have a reason for it. And it started off making short videos for other shows like intros or idents, they're technically called. Because I was really good at that. I loved the graphic design area of it and making videos that way. And I got so good at it that I just started streaming stuff and people were really interested. And like I said, I've grown a community now with creative thinkers. So if I ever need something, a map, a subclass, a monster that isn't in a handbook anywhere, I eventually remember I've got a Discord full of amazing people. I first had a mild panic attack, then try and do
Yeah.
it myself, then realize I'm not very good at it, and then realize I've actually got about 100 people who could do this for me. I'm like, yeah, let's do that. Let's do that. Can we skip to the last bit? But yeah.
Yeah, I mean that anxiety is kind of a tried and true thing in the space, right? Like anything
Yeah.
we're gonna do, it has to start
Yeah.
with the anxiety. Then we
Because
make the plan.
if you didn't have anxiety, you wouldn't have anything pushing you to do a plan.
Yeah.
A deadline is the biggest motivator in my eyes. For me and for a lot of people in the community, just because of the type of people we are. If you gave me 3 years to do a project that took an hour, I would start 2 years, 360 odd days, and 23 hours later. It just would.
Yep. Yeah. I absolutely can echo that sentiment. And I think that is actually a really good takeaway from a lot of
Hmm.
what we're going to discuss today is that idea that you that formatting makes so much of a difference in so
Hmm.
many things, especially in this space
Yeah.
where there's so much going on and so much you have to keep track of, even if we're just talking about producing the shows
Hmm.
and making sure the content is there. And I think that's
Hmm.
really cool getting that mention because
Yeah.
it's tough. It's tough and it's a really, really great tool. So you said that you guys are working on a couple of shows, and I'd really like to take a moment and talk about Homebrew Havoc.
Yeah.
For anyone out there who hasn't had the opportunity to see it, could you give us a brief kind of synopsis of what it is?
Absolutely. I don't know how brief it'll be because a lot is going on because it's just gone past our 1 year anniversary. But
Fair,
it's
fair.
basically it started as or the unique selling point of it is the community's project all thrown into one. It started off because a friend of mine, CLTTRPG, check him out on Twitter, Cal, fantastic player, fantastic person, messaged me on Twitter and said, "Hey, do you want to do a show together?" And it gave me flashbacks to when I started, actually. Um, but luckily, I'd learned the rules by then. And I said, "Yeah, what do you want it to be about?" And he went, "Anything you like." I was like, "That's incredibly vague. Thank you." But the one rule I had is, okay, but you have to find the players and they have to be from the UK. Two reasons for that. I, by that point, got tired of looking for players. And I got really tired of caring about time zones. It's like they have to be from the UK because they all live in the same time zone. And I don't want people to say, no, oh, that's 6 a.m. for me. Oh, that's 2 a.m. for me. I like, no, just time zones are the worst thing in the world. And I was thinking about it, it's like I was on Twitter, I was in all of these communities, I saw all these amazing things, these amazing projects. I was like, dang, they are so good. But these people who are creating them don't also have time to build a world to show them off. Well, I'm not creating anything. I have time to build a world. I'll reach out to these people and say, look, in a politer way, kind of steal your work and show it off. I obviously I credit every single person who gives me anything. But there was about 7 or 8 people that I was like, that's amazing. Not enough people are seeing it. And you need it tested in a real world scenario. You know, it's okay saying, oh, I made this item. Great. It's a piece of paper, it's got some words on it. Is it good? Is it powerful? Is it weak? Is it appropriate? Is it too strong in the wrong hands? Give it me. Eventually, I'll find out. And that's kind of how Homebrew Havoc began. The Havoc is definitely taken over. It gets more and more chaotic every single week, which is fantastic. It's how I've found out it's how I like to dungeon master. It's what I thrive off. I thrive off the chaos that is D&D. But yeah, so I reached out to all of these people. I said, look, I want to do your stuff. Most of it was public domain anyway. Sometimes I had to subscribe to someone's Patreon or just pay them a small fee at the start. And they said, yeah, have it, which is perfectly reasonable. So I said, all right, let's take it one step further. There will be no Wizards of the Coast product in this. With the exception of the races, and that's because I didn't want to challenge my players to find a brand new race because that got a bit complicated. But all the classes that my players play are all homebrew. All the enemies, locations, maps, monsters, NPCs, everything is created by somebody in the community. Even some of the side plots, in fact, there's about 3 or 4 side plots where I got them from somebody else. Someone said, oh, wouldn't it be really cool to do this? I'm like, yes, it would. Yes, it would. I'm going to shoehorn it in. I'll get a crowbar and I'll make it part of the plot. It's like one of them is quite a major side plot. I've got doppelgangers of all the players in my game, and they've been terrorizing random towns about 5 minutes before the players arrive. So everyone's like, hey, you guys, you did this thing. And they have to explain the concept of a doppelganger. But that was given to me by someone like 18 months ago. And it is just now coming to fruition as we near the end of Homebrew Havoc Season 1. And I would be nothing without this community. And I know a lot of people will say this because, like, oh, the community helped me in so many ways. No, the community built my game. Like, they're not just the rungs on the ladder. They're whatever I'm leading the ladder up against. They're the word of the ladder, you know. Absolutely. So yeah, Homebrew Havoc is my little baby. It's my first big project, and it gave me the confidence to do all the things that I've done since then. So
I
I
love
like
that. Yeah, hell yeah. So I remember when Homebrew Havoc started, and I was just absolutely like in love with the idea of showcasing all of that homebrew content from
Mhm.
the community because, like you said, there's just not enough time in the day to create a steady stream of content and then also create a world for it to inhabit
Precisely.
and present it to an audience,
Mhm.
in a way beyond like social media or Reddit
Yeah.
or what have you. And it's really cool getting the opportunity to see it all in action.
Yeah.
Um, have you ever worked with some of these creators more directly on, hey, I'm looking for this particular piece or this particular concept?
Mhm.
How could we implement that in what we're doing here? Or conversely, hey, we used your stuff. Here are some thoughts we have on it. Is there ever that sort of back and forth?
Great question. So there's definitely been I need this. Do you have it? There was a couple of examples of that. Maps is a big one. So my go-to map people are KY Tornado and Tim the One Shot. I forget his Twitter name because it's too long. Guy called Tim. Great, both of them amazing map makers. And at the time when I was first starting, so were they. So they gave me a lot of their stuff for free, which great pricing structure I felt at the time. Always pay people for your art, but if they're gonna give you stuff for free, don't turn it down. Um, so yeah, maps. I was like, look, I need a map to do this. Do you have the time to make it, or do you already have one in your catalog of maps? And either or, yes, they provided it. Always get positive feedback. Always shout them out on social media. Always say thank you to people who create your stuff. The other one was Abyssal Brews, who they didn't create all of my items, but I used all of their magical items, or all of the magical items I've used are theirs. I think there's like one or two exceptions that I had to make up on the spot. Um, but there was a lot of occasions, especially around the middle of the campaign, where I was like, I need this item. Hey guys, do you have anything like this? Because I was subscribed to their Patreon, and yes, I could go through their entire compendium, but there's like 100 items in
A
it now. And
lot.
I'm like,
Yep.
you guys know your items better than I do, and you could just whip it out of thin air. So there is about 8 or 9 messages over the last 9 months where I've gone, do you have a musical item that could summon something? Or do you have anything that would help down a mine shaft? And they'd give me 2 or 3 options each time. And they actually appeared as NPCs in my game. There's 2 people running Abyssal Brews, and both of them appeared as very important NPCs in my game because I wanted to show how much appreciation I had for them.
Love that. That's super cool.
Mhm.
So pivoting just a little bit,
Mhm.
conventions are such a huge opportunity for
Yes.
creators and personalities in the space,
Mhm.
to really connect with like a wider audience and present more of what they're doing
Yeah.
to people out there. And there's some really great experiences that people have at these. I know you had one pretty
I did.
recently.
I did. Nice slide there. Yeah. What a coincidence that you bring that up. I've had one. Yeah. um,
Yeah, tell us about it. Tell us
I
what the
know,
con
right?
was like and this experience of running a live game.
Honestly, it was the greatest experience I've ever had. Not just in TTRPG, but in my general life. I often compare it to my wedding day, which my wife gets really upset about. Um, Weird. But she was there and she saw how happy I was and how she describes it as I'm such a natural on stage. I've done I'll bring it back to League of Legends, but I really don't want to talk about that a lot. I've done casting, I've done commentating, live commentating on that. So I put a microphone in my hand. I love it. It's so much power. It's like everyone can hear me. It is amazing. Um, but yeah, the convention was wonderful. I was on stage with some amazing D&D players. I had Sealy, I had Mash or Mashashi, who ran the entire thing. She was in charge of it all. She did a wonderful job. I also had K of Double K, and I also Cat, which is the other K of Double K, um, who I'd only met there like 2 hours beforehand. And I said, "Oh, you guys playing D&D?" And they went, "Yeah." It's like, here's a character sheet. Please play this. But yeah, it was amazing. We had audience interaction. They were shouting NPC names at me, which is great because that's my weakest point as a dungeon master, is picking up names. I got down off the stage. The audience were rolling dice for me. They were giving me ideas for like I don't typically do accents, but like afflictions or mannerisms that the NPCs had. And yeah, I only had about 90 minutes on day 1 and an hour on day 2. but I've got such a bug for it, a thrill for it. I got off stage and I started Googling nearest conventions that I could play D&D. It was absolutely wonderful. I fully recommend it. However, do not make it an early thing because by George, you need confidence to do it. Right? I'm not about to say you need to know the rules of D&D because I still don't. Right? There's a lot of them, but you need to know what you're doing, and you need to have confidence in you to improv, which is what I do. The chaos of Homebrew Havoc really brought that to me. I need to improv almost weekly there, to quite a large degree. But yeah, absolutely fantastic. It certainly isn't something I could have done a year ago because I would just not have the bravery to have all these people staring at me. And you mentioned it's a great opportunity to broaden your audience. 2 days later, I was streaming again. I opened OBS and it brings up all the people who have followed you since you last logged on. I'd gained 20 followers over the weekend because of that convention. Because they were streaming it and it was a huge audience who had never heard of me, let alone saw me live.
Right.
Let alone see me DM or anything. And as great as it was to be on stage, as great as it made me feel, it was so humbling and honoring to have that many people see what I did on stage for 2 hours over the weekend and go, I want to see more of that guy. That guy's good enough. I want to see what he can do when he's got a computer and the rules and his own players. So yeah, absolutely astonishing moment. The rest of the con was fantastic as well. We had cosplay, we had a quiz and a bunch of Doctor Who stuff there, but that wasn't me, so I don't want to talk about that. I'm the one that was important there. But yeah, if anyone has an opportunity to go see someone play D&D live, go for it. I know there's lots of other groups to it. Roll the Damn Dice, who we're good friends with in the community, they do it almost like monthly because they've got a lot of theatre connections, and they're wonderful at it. I reached out to them before I went on stage and said, do you have any advice? And they said, when is it? I went, oh, it's in about a week's time. And they went, yes, you should have asked advice about a month ago. Oh, good. That's not advice. Thanks. Sure.
Well, it's good advice for the next time.
Well, yeah. It's good advice for past me. Great. Yeah. But no, they were wonderful. They helped in every way. They reassured me that it will be fine and that the audience is as forgiving as an audience on Twitch is. If something goes wrong, technical or otherwise, they'll understand. It's okay. Just try and be funny and try and be genuine. So I took that to heart. I'm kind of funny. I'm very genuine. I'm very quick to admit my mistakes. And I know I can improv. So I was quite happy. As soon as I got on stage, all the nerds left because someone put a microphone in my hand, which is a very dangerous thing. It really is. People shouldn't keep doing it. They kept doing it all weekend. Like, what's this? So I'm like, everybody can hear me. Hello.
Well, it seemed to work out. I mean, it can't be that bad of an idea, right? So having done this where, I've talked to a lot of people about this, the differences in like what you have to take into account when you run games. And so like home games are so intrinsically different from like streamed games, and streamed games are so intrinsically different from live games.
Absolutely.
What would you point out as some of the big differences that you noticed between those three different types of running TTRPGs?
So I have ran 3 sessions of home games. I've done all of my sessions online. But I can tell you that the biggest difference is how much time you spend not playing D&D. So it was kind of awkward because I always wanted to be a streamer. This isn't my first time attempting to stream, but it is my first time me committing to it and learning how to do it better. When I first started doing home games, I had the 3 big books next to me from Wizards, so Monster Manual, Player's Handbook, and Dungeon Master's Guide. And I needed those, and I wrote 8 A4 pages of plans and stat blocks and exactly where the characters were going to go. I won't lie, I wrote a novel because it was only a 2-hour session and all 8 pages were full. And then the players arrived and they were very well-behaved players. They didn't go exactly where I wanted them to. Looking back, I probably railroaded them. It was my early time. I made mistakes. I've learned from them, which is more important than what I actually did. But yeah, I think when you're at a home game, you probably spend more time playing actual D&D, especially if you don't know the players, because that's what they're there for, bonding. I've had a couple of sessions where I did know the players, and we barely played any D&D because we chatted, we had pizza, we played with my dogs at the time, and we had music on the TV, and we were listening to the music more than we were playing D&D. A little bit disappointing because I wanted to play D&D, but them's the breaks. That's what happened.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're online, you have a schedule, and you have to commit to it because at home there's, let's say, 4 people, you 3 players. They're the only people you are beholden to, right? If you're running late, you have upset 3 other people. If you can't make it, you've upset 3 other people. I'm at a stage now where if I miss a show, or I'm running late, which is more often than not, people will message me and say, hey, do you have a show tonight? Or, hey, are you running behind? And I'm like, I didn't even know you watched me. Like, I am, yeah. Like, I do have a show. I'm arguing with OBS about how to do it. But the idea that there is someone who is at home waiting for my show in the same way that I wait for an episode on TV is baffling. Like, surely you have better things to do than listen to me for 3 hours. There was a person, it was, I call her KT. Her name is KY Tornado, made my maps. I learned she rearranged her own D&D session from a Thursday to a Wednesday because she liked watching my show so much on Thursday night. She didn't want to play her own D&D game that game.
Amazing.
She messed 5 people's entire weekly schedule up for me. I'm like, you're weird. I wouldn't do this for me. And then obviously when you're performing live, if you don't turn up, well, the organizer of the convention is going to hate you at the very least, let alone anybody else who's going to be there. So yeah, I think time management, and obviously when you've got a computer, like I use 2 screens. When you've got a computer, you can look up all the rules instantly. You can roll dice electronically if you want to. I don't. I personally roll physical dice, and I allow my players to do the same. Big reason for that is we've all spent a lot of money on iDice. It would be nice to roll it.
Yep.
And we all have some beautiful dice. The electronic ones are kind of boring, which is fair enough. They're electronic. But yeah, I think the time management skills of it all and the level of expectations from me, the players, and the audience in terms of stream, that's got to be the biggest difference.
Definitely. Love that answer. Absolutely. Also, I will take half a second to just point out that, like, especially with D&D, more so than most other TTRPGs, the rules are secondary anyway.
Oh yeah, the rules are entirely optional. If you want to read the Dungeon Master's Guide, get to the point where it says the rules are optional, and then that's it. You don't need the rest of the book.
Yeah. I mean, there's some cool charts that you can probably check out, but like, nice whatever. just go to the community and get all your homebrew from there.
Precisely. When I was actually live on stage, I was worried that some of the audience wouldn't know D&D. So I said, if anyone doesn't know D&D, the rules are you roll a dice, the higher the number, the better it is. And I didn't plan that sentence. It came out of my mouth when I was on stage. But looking back at it, like, that's pretty much the only rule you need, actually. Roll a dice. If it's high, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
Everything else is just imaginary, like your imagination. That's entirely it.
Yeah. And that's something I really love about a lot of TTRPGs is just that ability to be like, look, there are a bunch of mechanics and there are a bunch of rules, and some games get really crunchy. But a lot of the time, outside of the like games that are built solely around their mechanics, it really does just come down to roll a die. Is it high? Great, you're doing a wonderful job. Yeah. You're fine.
If it's the maximum number on the die, that's a really good job. If it's the lowest, normally a 1, that's a really bad job.
Bad job. Yeah, and it's a really easy way to hook new people in by because the last thing you want to do is sit there for 30-40 minutes spewing out all of this mechanical knowledge at people. It just doesn't it's not interesting to most people when they're like, hey, I've heard of D&D or I've heard of Critical Role or I've seen, what is this? And we've seen a lot of people over, from the pandemic, and it hasn't really slowed down. But we've seen so many more people coming in and being interested, and then Critical Role exploded, and you've got the new movie. And
Yeah.
there's such a concentrated push to get more people interested in TTRPGs.
Hmm.
And I feel like the community, and I'm going to go off on a little bit of a tangent here, but I feel like the community has done a really good job also of highlighting so many different TTRPGs that
Yeah.
hit so many flavors. So
Yeah.
like there's this thing, and it's a big discourse, and I'm not gonna jump on either side because that's not what we're here for right now. But there's this whole thing where it's like, when do you modify a game too much, and it's time to
Yeah.
go to a different game, right? And it's like
Yeah.
there are arguments on both sides, but at the end of the day, roll the dice, have fun, be in the setting you want to be in, right? And
Hmm.
like that works. And I think the community's done a really good job of also highlighting that, and I think you've done a really good job of hitting that nail on the head.
Thank you. I completely agree with the whole modifying a system because occasionally I'll come up with an idea, typically sci-fi focused. Like, oh, I could run D&D sci-fi because I'm sure there's, homebrew stuff. I'm like, oh, I
Sure.
could do this and this could be that. I'm like, I'm almost certain there's probably a TTRPG out there that I should be playing that isn't D&D.
Yup.
And then I forget about the idea because I've got ADHD, so I've normally forgotten the other 7 ideas I had as well.
I write
Um,
everything down right away on
yeah,
my
yeah.
phone. I have just like 12 notepads where it's
Oh,
just
bless.
I'm like,
um,
one day I'll organize all these. One day.
it's fine. It's fine. That's why I think I can improv so much, because I've always got at least 9 ideas at the back of my mind. So if someone asks me, "Oh, could you do this?" I'm like, "Yes, I can. I've made notes already mentally, but that counts." Or I've told my wife, who is my notebook. Um, so yeah,
Love that. Yeah, and I think improv, touching on the improv thing. So I was a little bit of a theater kid. I did improv in college. And I sincerely do believe that everyone who plays, runs TTRPGs in any way can really benefit from that. Improv
mm-hmm,
is such a big part of what we do, right?
mm-hmm,
I doubly so when we're presenting content, like when we're streaming shows.
mm-hmm.
But for any TTRPG, and even for your home games, so much of it does end up just being off the cuff, because if you write 8 pages back and front,
Yeah,
you're going to use one of them and the rest
yeah,
are going out the window.
maybe.
Yeah.
You just get really angry, just throw the book across the room. But fine, don't
Yeah.
do my novel then. I don't
Yeah.
care. It's
I
fine.
know I know for me it was one of the hardest lessons to learn was not doing that, right? Because I am such a meticulous over planner. I overanalyze everything. And so what I did was I would write hundreds of pages sometimes. I had one campaign we ran for 8 years that I was running, and I had just I think 500 or 600 pages for that campaign. And of that, we used maybe 10.
Just
Maybe 10.
ridiculous.
And even in those 10, parts of them, and most of
Yeah,
it was changed wholly in the moment.
yeah.
Because that's just how it goes. And I think that that's part of the beauty of what we do here,
Mm-hmm.
is the ability
Absolutely.
to tell these stories on the fly with other people around us, and what you do specifically with the community.
Yeah, yeah. I gotta admit, the way that I get around or try and combine I need to overanalyze and plan everything versus they're not going to do any of that. Why are you bothering? Is for Homebrew Habit, I built every city, every world, um, every part of the continent that they live in that's called Antirso, I think. I
Mm.
didn't plan their names. There's about 7 different cities. I know exactly what they're all popular for. I know at least 3 plot hooks that my players could go to for each of them. I know a handful of NPCs, not nearly enough apparently, but a handful of NPCs. And I knew what order the main story, would take them. Right? They went off track a bit, but eventually they will come back on, apparently. They assure me they will at some point. They promised, okay? But so it meant that no matter where they went in the world, no matter what they wanted to do in that city, whether it was go to the fighting pits, go to the mine, or go see the royal family, I'd already prepared it. So they got to that session. I'm like, yeah, you can do that. Absolutely. And then chat cottoned on, and they were like, if we sent them here, would you be prepared? I was like, I'd prepared to get them there. Might end the session after that, but yeah. But yeah, prepare as much as you can, and nothing will go right. So do whatever you like.
Yeah, yeah. The chaos gremlin energy is always strong, no matter who you have on your table. And you see that through all the different. I don't like to use the word tiers, but all the different tiers of stream shows, from
Yeah,
top to bottom. The chaos energy
yeah.
is strong, and you have to be ready for it.
I will admit, and we are going on to this improv thing quite a bit, but it's a great topic, I feel.
Yeah.
I've realized recently it is so liberating how little I have to plan now because I've given up. Right? I've stopped. There in the first, let's say I've been streaming for a year now. It's been a bit over for that. In the first 6 months, I was caught out just over once a month. So let's say 7 or 8 times. In the last 6 months, I've been caught out twice in terms of someone said, I've done this. What happens? I'm like, I don't know. You're going to have to give me 5 minutes. The second one was one of my players licked a frog. And it was in Barovia. And I'd kind of forgotten why I'd put the frogs there in the first place. I was like, well, something has to happen. This can't be a normal frog because that's boring. Give me 5 minutes to think of something. The second one was someone rolled a nat 1 on persuading an NPC that he needed to take his sentient fridge to the bathroom with him because he holds his penis. The sentient fridge holds a player's penis. That's the only way they can go for it. And then he rolled a 1, and it was homebrew habit. And I was like, well, he's not going to not believe you because that's a really weird thing to lie about. He's not going to question it. So it's like, all right, look, you convinced him. You can make it happen. However, this is now canon. You cannot go to the bathroom without the sentient fridge. That is your punishment for rolling a nat 1. So now it's, a meme in the chat and in the players. I'm like, nope, you want to go bathroom? Got to take Colin with you, the sentient fridge. Otherwise you can't go. And at one point, the sentient fridge got kidnapped. And so I had to give him like pseudo levels of exhaustion because he needed the bathroom really badly.
Love that. I think I remember that one actually. I love that one. That's so
It was a
good
episode. It was such a chaotic time in the game.
Yeah. Well, chaos has kind of been reigning for a while now.
It's a consistency. It really is. Every single session is something different. We've got an exciting session coming up when we're recording this. I'm not sure it's coming out. That we're going to do a teeny bit of retconning, and one player knows about it. The other 3 don't.
Interesting.
And it's going to be a big. It's not really retconning. It's more of a flashback. And it's going to have some big impacts. And I'm going to tell the other 3 players that they can't say or do anything because they're not in the scene, and they just have to wait.
Oh, that's amazing. I love that. Moments like that can be so good. So good. You get those really honest, like emotional, organic reactions from your players, and there's nothing beats that. So I know we spent a lot of time on Homebrew Havoc and a lot of time on improv. I'd like to shift us just a little bit. I know you're working on a bunch of stuff at any given time, but I'd like to focus in on one of your more recently announced projects. I'm going to make sure I say this right. I know I did before. Descendium.
Yes.
We did it.
Yes.
I know you're working on bringing it to Kickstarter. What is it? How did it come to be? Tell us about it.
So I've learned during my time in the community, always do your second best idea first, because then you'll make all these mistakes and your first great idea or your best idea would be flawless, or certainly less mistakes. Sure. So sadly, Descendium is my second best idea for Kickstarter. My first being Homebrew Havoc, but I need to make mistakes first. But it's still a massive passion project. I don't want to take anything away from it. I'm super excited for it. It was a project that I spent about 6 months just thinking about in my head, working it over, talking to my wife, who was like my soundboard in terms of ideas. She told me if something good, bad, gives me better ideas most of the time. And so Descendium is, the crutch of it is your players will are level 20 when you begin this campaign. They've already slain the biggest gods, the biggest enemies in your land, the greatest monsters, the fiercest beasts, whatever you want to do. And then, so in this particular portion of Descendium, Odin, the Viking god, Norse god, calls upon you and says, somebody has stolen my wife. Frigga. That somebody is Zeus. We know who it is. It's Zeus. And because we all know who Zeus is, we know why Zeus has stolen somebody else's wife.
Always got to be Zeus.
Zeus, mate. Just calm down, right? So he sends them to the Greek realm, the realm of the Pantheon. No, the realm of the Greek gods. It's not Pantheon, but I forget the name. And you have to climb Mount Olympus, overcome these gods, and eventually, potentially save Zeus. Not save Zeus, don't do that. Save Frigga and kill Zeus. You can save Zeus if you really want to, but he's probably fine. Now, the way that I wanted to make this interesting is, or the reason why I start them all at level 20 is because no session gets to level 20, no campaign does. You cut out around 15, 16 maybe. Some do get to level 20, and that's great, but you're basically gods at that point. So
you really got to push for it.
Yeah. Right. So I was like, no, my players are going to be level 20. They're going to be powerful. Now, how do I make it interesting? In Descendium, there is a somewhat unique level down structure. The canon reason for this is you are in the wrong realm. You are meant to be in the Norse realm, or whatever realm you really want to pick. I chose Norse because it's me. It's my book. I can do what I like. Yeah, my world. Go away. You're from the Norse realm. You're being sent to the Greek realm. You're not supposed to be there, so you're losing power. Which is also why Odin can't just hop over and do it himself. Because I did need to think of a reason for that to happen.
Right.
Because Odin's just grabbing these 4 guys. Like, yeah, you go do my work. Like, no, it's your wife. Like, go away.
Yeah, go get her.
Yeah, Odin can't risk losing levels and becoming weak because that reasons. Right. So
the Aesir is very complicated. That's why.
Yeah,
there's a lot going on over there. Yeah.
It's got a whole 9 realms. It's fine. This is your job, okay? So you go over that and you start to lose levels. The reason why it's pseudo unique is because I've created an easy, medium, and hard mode for how that level down feature works. Effectively, the gods are split into factions. The 12 gods of the Pantheon are split into factions. And the harder it is, there's different factions for each level. But it's basically gods who agree with Zeus or side with him, and gods that don't. Hera, Zeus's wife, for some reason, doesn't agree with Zeus stealing another wife.
That's strange. I can't imagine why.
Why wives be like that? Just, calm down. So no matter the difficulty, Hera will not be on Zeus's side, so she takes less levels off of you. In hard mode, she still takes 1. In easy and medium, she doesn't take any. But in hard mode, she might take 2. You have to appeal to her good nature or a certain task, and then she'll only take 1, not 2. I've done the math. If you play the worst possible way you could, you will end up level 8 when you face Zeus.
That's not good.
And because you're getting weaker, all the gods stay at the same level. That's how they become harder. Because in a normal game, you level up, monsters level up, everything is equal level difficulty. But in Descendium, that isn't the case. So the worse you play, the quicker you level down. If you face off against Zeus at level 8, you'll die in like 1 round of combat.
Sure.
Here's a level 24 god. Yeah, you'll die. I've seen the stat block. I know you'll die. If you're approaching anything less than 15, I think you're going to have a really hard time, if I'm honest.
So it creates a sort of like ticking clock then.
Yeah,
right?
Precisely.
I love that. That's such a cool idea.
And the better you play, the higher level you'll be at facing Zeus. And that's where easy, medium, and hard comes into it. In easy mode, you can probably just stroll through. You get to Zeus at level 16 at the worst. Most likely level 18 to 20. And it will be a challenge because it's Zeus. He's got to be.
Sure.
But you should be okay. But the important thing is the way that I'm doing it, because it's also going to be an actual play. We start recording this Friday, actually. We are going to be recording 4 one-shots, 4 singular sessions. And that will be the players getting level 5, level 10, level 15, and then a level 20 one-shot. This is to generate a shared backstory and familiarity with the players. Because just getting 4 random adventurers at level 20 smushed together like, oh, I've never heard of you. Really? Because I've just defeated 1 billion ogres for some reason. Right? It's not going to work. They need that shared community, shared story, shared backstory. So that's how I'm going to create that. And that's what I advise in the Kickstarter. And those sessions will be recorded, not streamed. They're going to be edited and released to the public when I finally get around to editing them. So sometime next year, probably. And then
later this year, right? Later this year.
Yeah. Later this year, we will start streaming it. Streaming the Descendium. So the first stream, they'll be level 20. And hopefully that will drum up some interest for the Kickstarter. and then the Kickstarter will be released, and you guys can hopefully help me do that and create this thing. Most of the artwork is already done. Similar to Homebrew Havoc, I have commissioned a lot of the community to help with this. So I've got Lost Haven art for the art. Jack the Giant Killer has created all the gods because that's his thing.
Yep.
I've got about 8 different people doing different maps because what I really wanted was for each god to have their own section of maps made by a different person because it's their part of Olympus, so to speak, metaphorically. And they should have unique features in their maps that other people don't, that other gods don't. I've also created some subclasses. First time I've ever created subclasses that come part of the Kickstarter. One of the players is actually playing one of the subclasses. So the subclasses are my good lord, everything's left my head.
That's okay.
A wizard of Odin. A wizard inspired by Odin. A druid inspired by Loki.
Ooh.
Yeah. Where you get to transform eventually into one of 3 of Loki's children. So it's literally something along the lines of Pegasus, sea snake, and a land animal. A giant wolf, I think.
Yeah, it's
like
a wolf. Yeah.
Yeah. And then there is my personal favorite because I like the god, is the Paladin of Tyr, who is the Norse equivalent of Ares, so war and justice. He's the one that lost an arm for sticking it into a giant wolf's mouth, which I think is kind of stupid.
Yeah. We make choices. People make choices.
It's an interesting choice. But yeah, and then some of the stretch goals are more subclasses. We've got Jack. No, we've got Angry Bugbear for making all the unique weapons.
Awesome.
So there's 8 weapons that come with the Kickstarter. And there's 4 from each side. So there's stuff like Shield of Ajax, Artemis's bow. There's a bag of dragon's teeth, which is like roll a d6. If you roll a 6, the tooth you throw on the ground spawns into a skeletal dragon. If you roll a 1, it's just like a normal skeleton, but still, it's quite exciting.
Yeah.
So a bunch of weapons that are up to my players to use, and obviously part of the Kickstarter. It's my first Kickstarter I've ever ran. I've brought in a lot of the community. I've gotten some advice from some of the best Kickstarter generators around. So Style of Souls Rolls, Awfully Queer Heroes are, helping me advertise and promote it. And I think it's Hatchlings.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Hatchlings, who I swear to God run a Kickstarter every 3 days. Well, they've funded them all, so I'm not going to start on them.
Yeah, the success is real.
Yeah, like you can't argue with their success. Yeah. So yeah, got loads of people in on it. I'm really, really excited that it's finally coming into fruition. Starts recording this week. The one shot should take about 4 to 6 weeks, and then what month are we in? May, June, July time. I think we'll start streaming it. It's very late because all my players are American. So for me, it is at 11 p.m. And it will go on for about 3 hours. So I'll stop at 2 a.m. I would feel bad, but one of my players is somewhere peculiar. And so she starts it at 6 a.m. And I could not imagine waking up at 6 a.m. to play D&D. So I don't complain about my late night because she's got to be up at super early.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, it gets really interesting sometimes with those time zones.
Yeah.
And so what inspired the sort of Greek versus Norse theme here?
So I love the Greek pantheon. I think it's super interesting. I've read into the official lore, as official as it gets, and a lot of the alternative universe lore. It's something that me and my wife really connected over when we first started dating. So it's sort of our passion for it has grown along with our relationship, which is kind of cool. And then the Norse pantheon is super exciting as well. It's greatly underrated. It's got a bit of love because of Marvel and Thor and all that stuff. But it's not the same, guys. Come on.
No, it's so different.
Yeah.
Don't.
No, like Hell is not a sister. She's a rule of. Anyway, not focusing on that. Yeah. So the more I read about the Norse lore, the more interesting it got. There's a lot of parallels there. And I always had this idea of someone climbing Mount Olympus and doing that. And then I had this idea of leveling down. It's like, well, why would they level down? That doesn't like Zeus zaps their powers. That's kind of boring. I don't really want that. And then I think I had an entirely separate idea about doing Viking players. And my wife's like, hey, you know that idea you've got? And this other idea you've got. Here's a third idea about connecting those ideas, which is how a lot of my ideas actually come into fruition. It's about 7 mismatched puzzle pieces coming into one and making some Frankensteinian monster. So yeah, that was pretty much it. It answered a lot of the questions like how can I get Viking players? Why would they lose powers? Why are they fighting the gods anyway? Because my original idea was that they became so powerful the gods got jealous. But I wasn't really committed with the idea. And I could tell I wasn't. I was like, I need an out. I need a way. I need a different idea for this. So my wife gave it to me because she gives me all my best ideas. She's generally fantastic. Don't try to have said that though. She might hear me.
Yeah, well, we'll cut that in editing.
Yeah, thank you.
I think that is just about going to do it for our episode of Roll for Perspective. But before we go, I want to give you the opportunity if there's any closing thoughts, cool stuff you have coming up, where people can find you.
Absolutely. So, thank you very much for hosting me. This has been wonderful. I have been Paul, aka Ampersand. You can find me literally everywhere that I am at Ampersand D20. So that's Twitter, TikTok, Twitch, and I also have a Discord, which I assume there will be links below.
Yep.
Might not be. Might just be nothing.
There will be. There will definitely be links
it's a
down
blank
that way.
space. It's fine. So yeah, come check us out, especially if you've got anything you want to create. I'm always taking in ideas for Homebrew Havoc and random other stuff because it's never finished, and my players are already starting to create characters for season 2. And I'm like, I don't know how season 1's going to end, so that's exciting. But yeah, huge shout out to all of my players across all of my streams, and of course the wonderful community that none of us would be here without, because there'd be nobody to listen to my ramblings or this show. So it's really convenient that other people exist outside of my bedroom.
Unless you happen to be a solopsis, in which
Well,
case,
yeah,
you know,
no, that's okay too. We don't judge here; it's fine.
Yeah, then we're supporting ourselves, which is fine too. Right?
Yeah,
it's important to love yourself.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, all of the socials and more will be linked down below. Thank you so much for being here again. Thank you everyone for checking this out. As we go, we have this tradition that we've started for Roll for Perspective. I was wondering if you'd be interested in. I know we'd spoken about this before. Usually it's people GMing us out. I know you've got a little bit of a special take on that you're going to do.
Yes. So the way I end my streams is I do a dramatic reading of a song, typically one recommended by chat or one that I've heard recently and thought would be really cool. So for this, I allowed our wonderful host to choose a song. And as I pretend to know the lyrics, would you like to tell us what song you have chosen?
Yes. Classic internet meme icon George Michael's Careless Whisper.
Excellent. Okay. I feel so unsure as I take your hand and lead you to the dance floor. As the music dies, something in your eyes calls to mind a silver screen and all is its sad goodbyes. I'm never going to dance again. Guilty feet have got no rhythm, though it's easy to pretend. I know you're not a fool. I should have known better than to cheat a friend and waste a chance that I'd been given. So I'm never going to dance again the way I danced with you. Oh, well. Thank you.
Powerful words. Until next time, this has been Roll for Perspective. Remember to take care of yourself, eat enough, drink enough, love yourself. You deserve a seat at the table. Always tell your tales.